Okay, so my book is Hold Back the Tide by Melinda Salisbury. It is a fantasy, mystery, and horror, and I will be talking about the ending, so if you don't want to hear the ending, then click away now. So why did I choose this book for third quarter? Well, I saw this on the shelves at the library, and I wanted to just see what it was about, so I read the first few pages, and actually, the first sentence caught my attention right away. And I'll read it here. Here are the rules of living with a murderer. That was the first sentence, and it caught my attention right away. And it goes on to talk about the 4 rules of living with a murderer. 1, do not draw attention to yourself. 2, if you can't be invisible, be useful. 3, if you can't beat them, join them. And 4, don't make them angry, which makes sense. So, yeah, it just really caught my attention. It hooked me in. And, yeah, so that's why I picked this book. So, moving on. Plot summary. I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can. The story is set in a small town called Ormskula around a loch. And a loch is a body of water that is completely or partially landlocked. The main character in my book is Ilva Douglas, a 16-year-old girl who overheard her father killing her mother. And she was forced to live with her mother's murderer, her father, because the police never had enough evidence to lock him up, and Ilva doesn't have any other family to live with, so she's been forced to live with him for the past 7 years. Ilva and her father, Lachlan, are the keepers of the loch. They are called Nyanthils, and Ilva's chore is to monitor the water levels of the loch, a task that her father takes very seriously. The water from the loch runs into a river, into a mill that makes up most of the town's income. And Giles Stewart, who runs the mill, he's like the boss man of the town, the entire town. He basically controls law enforcement and everything too. And he's very greedy. So he's been taking up a lot of water recently, which is draining the loch of its water faster than it can refill. And that little information will be crucial later on. So when the summer festival came around, Ilva decided to go, and she did. She had a fun time at the festival with her friends, and on the way back, she was admiring the moonlight, taking in the cool air around her. But as she turned around to walk inside her house, she was met with a tall, bone-white creature that she describes to be 7, maybe 8 feet tall, no hair, head and long limbs bare, wearing no clothes, ribs and every vertebrae of its spine were visible. Skin tight over her wrist and ankle, as if it was starving, crotch was completely smooth, and chest was flat and unmarked. This monster seemed to sense that Ilva was there, but couldn't see her. So she was frozen in place, and after some time, the creature ran away, and she ran inside. The next day, she woke up, and she was locked inside her house, and her father was nowhere to be seen. So after a while, he came back home. He wasn't happy. So he wrapped his finger around the trigger of his gun, which made Ilva think that he was going to shoot her the way he did with her mother. But just then, Giles Stewart comes in with his men, and they arrest Ilva's dad. So, yeah, Giles ends up taking Ilva in as one of his own, since her father's gone now, and since she has no home. So, Giles seems kind at first, until he made her change right in front of him. And Ilva attacked Giles for being such a pervert and shot him in the leg and ran away. Later, Ilva and Ren, her lover, and Gavin, who is Giles' son, they decide to make this trap for the white bone creatures. Ilva wanted to prove to Gavin and Ren that they do exist, because they didn't believe her when she first brought it up. And in the morning, they had caught one of these in the cage, and when they touched it to see if it was alive, it just turned into dust. And this showed that sunlight was their weakness, and they showed other villagers that they caught this monster, and that these monsters are attacking people. And yeah, so they run out of bait, so they have to use themselves to be in the cage. So Gavin volunteers to be in the cage first, and then Ilva can't watch Gavin be in the cage, so she makes him get out, and she gets in the cage. So after some time, the monsters show up, and these monsters, they're smarter. They're more high class. They're aware what the cage can do, and they're aware that if they go in the cage, they'll get trapped and they'll die. So these creatures attack Gavin, and they cut his throat, and Elva sees this, and she gets out of the cage. And as she does that, she falls and hits her head, and she gets knocked out. So she wakes up in the monster's den, and she's there with another girl, Cora. It was dark, and they had to feel their way out. So Elva and Cora got to a spot where they had to climb on each other to get up. And Elva got out, and she told the village about where the den was, and that it was under the lock. And since the water level is lowering because of Giles Mill, these creatures have been escaping the underwater den and attacking people. And of course, they don't believe her at first, but Giles Stewart sets up a trap, and he has his men watching with guns ready to fire, and Elva was put in the jail for the meantime. And they caught a creature, and Elva got a look at the creature from the jail cell window, and when she saw it, it was her mother's face. And her father reveals that her mother had turned into one of these creatures 7 years ago, and when she tried to attack him, he fired 4 warning shots, which made her run away. And Elva got out of jail, and she went to rescue Cora. After Elva gets out, she finds that she's been bitten by one of these creatures, and being bitten by one of these creatures means that you either die or you turn to one of them. And she tells Ren to shoot her before she turns into into one of the creatures. And it ends on a cliffhanger from there. Okay, now let's talk about the characteristics in this book. And I'm only going to talk about the main characters. So, yeah. So, Elva is the main character. I'd say she's very brave and determined to figure something out once she sets her mind to it. And I'll read this quote to show her bravery. The scream comes again, from the back, by the henhouse. Still clutching my knife, I dart from my room, staying close to the walls as I can as I move through the hall to the kitchen. I pull the shutter back and listen. It's silent, but the skin on the back of my neck prickles, like I'm being watched. Something crashes into the front door, and I cry out. Then I run towards it, arm raised, knife gripped tightly. She ran towards the danger instead of running away or hiding from it, which shows her bravery. Okay, next up we have Ren, and he's another main character in the book, and he's very protective of Elva. When she was in danger, he tried to protect her. So, quote, Ren starts pulling the twine from the back door, trying to get me before I can see my idea through. He was trying to get Elva to get out of the cage before she hurts herself doing something dumb, which she was going to do. Next, we have Elva's dad, Lachlan. He is a very authoritative and secretive person. Quote, No, he snaps, his eyes blazing. You're to stay in the house, do you hear me? And you keep away from the windows. Do you understand me, Elva? Grabbing my shoulders and shaking me till my teeth rattle. He also didn't want Elva to know about the monsters, keeping it to himself, so. And finally, we have Giles. He's basically the antagonist. He's also a pervert. Yeah. Quote, You just be a good girl and put it on. He points to the dress at the barrel of the gun. I'm going to close my eyes and count to 10, he continues. You either put it on yourself or I'll put it on you. Okay, my favorite scene is also a great example of the author's writing style, which is very descriptive. Quote, The reflection of the moon makes a pretty path on the water of the loch, and I stop just outside the cottage, taking it in for the last time, breathing in the smell of the water, and the rushes, and the mud. It looks like a scene from a fairy tale, everything cast in pewter and black. The reeds silvered by the moonlight, and the shadows between them in velvety dark. The water beyond the mirror of the sky, above the glittering as though 1,000 stars just sit beneath the surface. Okay, so my personal opinion of the book is that it was very good once the monsters were introduced, because the first half of the book, it was slow and kind of boring, but once the monsters were introduced, it made everything better. It was very suspenseful because the author used short sentences during a lot of the scenes to create a really suspenseful mood. And when you find out that Elva's mother was kind of alive was a really good plot twist, and it just caught me by surprise. I think a probable theme is to not jump to conclusions, because Elva and all the villagers assume that her father killed her mother because Elva heard him shoot 4 shots and didn't get to see what actually happened, and she didn't know the truth when he reveals it later. The ultimate audience for my book is young adults and teenagers who enjoy reading mystery, fantasy, and horror books.